Welcome to Thursday's edition of Renew. I'm Pastor Tony Cowan. Thanks for joining us, and let's get right to the point today. We are talking about the reality that God is gracious, that He deals with us and relates to us according to His grace. And of course, we have to receive that through our faith. We have to believe and trust in His mercy, love, and grace towards us. Boy, I tell you, this is such a big subject right here. There's so much that we could give you, and we'll probably get back to it again someday, but I'm trying to give you some of the foundational principles and truths that I believe you'll study out, that your mind will become renewed to some of these realities right here, and you'll begin to see God in a different light, and you'll begin to see yourself in a different light. We're going to go to Ephesians chapter 2. If you were with us in earlier podcast, we were over in Ephesians 2 talking about verses 1 through 4 particularly, but we're going to pick it up in verse 4 and move ahead from there and really center in and talk about the grace of God here. Ephesians chapter 2 and verse number 4. It says, but God. Now remember in verses 1 through 3, he was talking about how we used to be, the way we were, so to speak. And that we were following the course of this world. We were by nature the children of wrath, just as others, following the evil spirit that led us into disobedience. But then in verse 4 it says, but God. See, that's where everything changed. That's where everything hinged. See, our salvation all begins and originates with God. It does not originate with you. See, we're going to end up in error if we think salvation is a work from man to God. We always have to see it as a work of God to man. It originates with God. It says, but God, who is rich in mercy, because of His great love wherewith He has loved us. Verse 5, even when we were dead in trespasses, He made us alive together with Christ. By grace you have been saved. Verse 6 says, and raised us up together and made us sit together in heavenly places in Christ Jesus. Now notice what happened here. Now again, I had the mindset growing up, and this was a lot of man-made religion and some of my own concoctions up in my head, I think. That, when you got saved, when you were born again, you just barely got saved. You just barely made it in by the skin of your teeth, so to speak. And you basically used up all the grace, the love of God, the mercy of God, and you were kind of on your own after that. That is not what this verse is saying at all. These verses are telling us not only did the grace of God get us out of hell, give us fire insurance, so to speak, but the grace of God also launched us into the highest place that we could go, and that is at God's own right hand in the heavenly places. Boy, that is extreme grace right there. I don't care how you look at it, how you slice it. It is extreme grace when you think that God took His enemies, the ungodly, all of us who weren't deserving of this at all, who deserved to go to hell and be condemned for eternity. He took us out, not only saved us barely, but then launched us up into the heavenly place, into that place of favor. See, the right hand is always that place of favor, and that's where He has called us and made us to be seated with Jesus in those heavenly places. Now the Amplified says in verse number 6 there that we've been given joint seating with Jesus. In other words, the same seat. It's a big love seat for all of us to be there, but He has given us the same seat as Jesus Himself. Now Jesus earned it, but we get in on what Jesus deserves. See, that's the grace of God in action right there. That's the grace of Jesus working toward us, giving us a place with God, next to God, that we could never earn or deserve or merit for any reason. Boy, that's awesome right there. And see, that's why he goes on in verse number 7 and says it this way, that in the ages to come, He might show the exceeding riches of His grace in His kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. See, that's who God really is right there. He is trying to operate in kindness toward us in Christ Jesus. He wants to operate in the exceeding riches of His free grace. Now the Amplified in verse number 7, I won't have time to read all of it, but it says that in the ages to come, He might show the immeasurable, limitless, surpassing riches of His free grace in His kindness and goodness of heart toward us in Christ Jesus. See, that's the real God right there. That's the true nature of God. That's the true heart of God. And see, we see it coming through on this verse right here. Now, a lot of people again think, well, that's a sweet by and by verse. It is, but you know what? It's also a right here and now verse. He said, in the ages to come. I believe from the time that Jesus was crucified on the cross, buried, resurrected, ascended into heaven, that he opened heaven back up to all of us by the grace of God. I believe that's when that thing started, that in the ages to come, God was going to demonstrate the exceeding riches of his free grace. I would say it this way, that is over the top grace. Now, I know a lot of people get real nervous about that right there. When you start talking this way, you're going to give people a license to sin. No, I believe when you get a true revelation of grace and what it has done and what it's doing in our life right now, you don't want to go into sin. You want to run away from sin. You want to get so close to this gracious, kind-hearted, good God. You want to please him with every fiber of your being. See, I believe that changes our heart when we see and exactly what kind of heart God has towards us. It's a heart of grace. Man, I wish I had more time. That's all the time I've got for today. If you'd like additional resources and materials, go to tonycowan.org, and we'll see you tomorrow.